Ready? Where shall I keep? 1, 2, 3. Is it okay now?
1, 2, 3.
Yes, now.
Is it on? Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having accepted that little interview. I will immediately ask or convey questions which have been conveyed to me by two of the ladies who were on a panel on our group. The first question is, what is Israel's position after it was revealed that the NSA was eavesdropping on Israel officials and private Bibi conversation, re-election, and the GPGA?
Well, to say the truth, we are not surprised, because every state listens to everything which this state can listen to. And the fact that America is listening to everything which moves in the world does not surprise anyone, and should not surprise anyone, including Israelis. This is one thing. But the second thing is that we actually depend on America in many areas, especially security and policy, Security Council in the United Nations, for example. So there is a limit to what Israel can say to America, even if America is caught listening to Israelis. Yeah. Red.
Second question is, what measures is Israel taking the famous so-called Iran nuclear deal? We're talking about from a military standpoint.
Well, I'm not sure that I know what happens in this issue, because even if there is some kind of preparations, they are not in the media. And even if I knew, you don't expect me to reveal them.
I personally didn't expect it.
Right. So what I can say that Israel, according to all kinds of foreign media, might have some kind of deterrence vis-à-vis Iran. There are all kinds of rumors about what Israel has or doesn't have. I personally don't know. But there are rumors. And the Iranians might read these rumors and might take them seriously. And you don't mess with a country which might retaliate in a way which will devastate you. Mm. So apparently the Iranians are not suicidal as a state and as a country and as a society. So if it is correct that Israel has some deterrence vis-à-vis the Iranians, they will not attack Israel. But sometimes countries do things which are not expected. So for this we need intelligence. And apparently Israel has some intelligence about the Iranians, some knowledge about their intentions, their preparations. And if there is a situation which Israel has to act, I am more than sure that Israel will act, but not in a premature situation.
In that context, Mordechai, without entering into military secrets, are there any cooperation countries in the Middle East working, or let's say that Israel has already had contacts in that respect?
Well, there are all kinds of information or rumors that Israel cooperates in a way or another with countries like Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Kuwait maybe as well, Qatar, about how to face the Iranian threat, which is shared by the Israelis, by the Saudis, and others in the Middle East. If this is correct, we might see in the future actions which some countries take, whether with coordination or cooperation, I really don't know. But these are all rumors. Could be that they have some basis.
Thank you. Changing totally, the question is, anti-Israel attitudes in Europe are unfortunately growing. What proactive measures are being considered as a countermeasure?
Well, Israel cannot force itself on anyone. If the Europeans whether the old Europeans or the new Europeans, means the Muslims, hate Israel, we cannot force them to love us. If they do not want to buy our products, we'll find other markets for our products. We are flexible enough usually to adjust our products to the markets which will buy our products and not those who reject us. And you know, Jews also, another aspect of the hatred, Jews through history knew how to move from place to place if they felt threatened. And what you can see today in France, for example, how the Jewish community in France, which is there for hundreds of years, actually are leaving France in big numbers. Many of them come to Israel because in Israel they feel free, not under threats of neither the old Europe, means the French, or new Europe, as it is with the Islamic immigration to Europe.
Is that the French? If I correct me if I'm wrong. I heard that they are mainly concentrated in Nahariya, the French community.
Not only in Nahariya, you can find French people in Nahariya, in Ashdod, in Ra'anana, in Herzliya, in Netanya, many of them, because they like to live on the seashore.
Sure, yeah.
So no, you cannot. There are all kinds of places. Usually they buy apartments according to where they can find jobs, universities, housing in price which they can afford. Yeah, it's a free country and they can move. Look, even if they live in Ashdod or in Nahariya, the distance is maybe 2 hours ride, minimal, yeah. So it's minimal.
Next question is, if Israel could fix issues at the United Nations, what would be the first priority?
The first priority, in my humble view, is to change the world view to states which are dictatorships and states which are illegitimate. In my view, the world should start challenging the being of such states, like Iran, like Iraq, like Syria, which is not a state anymore, Sudan, and start maybe suggest to these countries to divide themselves to more homogeneous components, because homogeneous states, socially homogeneous, are much more peaceful internally and much more peaceful to others, while states which are conglomerates, combinations of tribes, of ethnic groups, of religious groups and sectarian groups, usually in order to consolidate the people under the aegis of an illegitimate ruler, they are looking for outside enemies. When they create problems with others, so everybody will unite under the aegis of the illegitimate ruler. So this is why these countries usually are undermining the stability of the world. This is why the world should recommend to these countries maybe to divide themselves to more homogeneous units.
Very good. What, if anything, can Bibi Netanyahu do to prevent Barack Hussein Obama from ascending to the UN throne when Ban Ki-moon leaves in 2017?
No, I don't think that is something personal between Netanyahu and Obama. And if Obama wants to become an actor on the global arena, I don't think that Netanyahu will say anything against it, especially not explicitly. Maybe behind the scenes, like many others. But it's not a personal issue. It's a matter of worldview. It's a matter of policy. It's not a personal issue.
There was a question from one of those, the ladies in the panel. If you could comment on Martin Luther King's pro-Israel legacy. You know that today is Martin Luther King Day.
Yes.
And he has been, I would say, at least a good friend of Israel.
Martin Luther King, don't forget, he was supported immensely by the Jewish community here in the United States of America, more or less because Jews identify with the plight of the Afro-Americans, because we were persecuted, we were chased, and in Europe, you know what happened to us in the Second World War. So definitely this is what made Jews feel that the agony of Afro-Americans in this country made them much more sympathetic with those agonies. This was the combination between the Jews in general, in Israel particularly, but also the Jews here in the United States of America with the plight of the Afro-Americans.
Now, changing on the international scene, what countries in the Middle East does Israel feel a link directly or indirectly? Talking about countries like Egypt with al-Sisi, Jordan, which has always been a friend of, had a special relationship with Israel. How do you see this kind of relationship developing?
Well, we have to bear in mind that initially the Arab world was united against
Israel.
Against Israel. Even Egypt, a state which today we have peace with, invaded Israel right after the Declaration of Independence in 1948 in order to get rid of Israel. Jordan as well. So initially those nations, the Arab nation, the Islamic nation, do not see Israel as a legitimate entity. Okay, with the years, Israel succeeded to convince them that we Jews are not going anywhere. And we came back to our forefathers' land in order to remain there, in order to establish our state and to defend it when needed. Okay, so since some leaders like Sadat in Egypt, King Hussein in Jordan, understood that instead of fighting and failing, they would better live in some kind of peace with Israel, not because they loved us, not because they were hugging us and kissing us, just because we became part of the picture of the Middle East, whether they like us or not. So they say, okay, let's live with this rather than die with this. So this is what happened. There is no love, no hugs, no kisses in the Middle East, and we know it.
This, because the problem, as I personally see it, is a crucial moment for King Abdullah. King Abdullah now has eyes on the doorsteps.
In Jordan?
Yes. And I think he always, as I understood, he always wanted Israel to be on the river in order to defend his borders.
It's not the first time when Jordan depends on Israel. Israel saved Jordan in several cases from Syria, from Iraq, from other threats which threatened the Jordanian kingdom. And I emphasize the word kingdom because don't forget that Jordan is some kind of state which is 80% Palestinians, 20% Bedouins, and the ruling family are not even Jordanian.
No, they're Saudi Arabian.
They came from Saudi Arabia, were chased out by the Saudis, and the British nominated the Abdullah I as the Emir of Transjordan, which later became the Kingdom of Jordan. So they know that they have some problems of legitimacy, especially in the eyes of the majority of the Jordanians, the Palestinians. So in some cases they depend on the Israelis to save them from threats which come from the outside. But don't forget that Israel considers Jordan as it is some kind of a buffer zone between Israel and whatever happens to the east from Israel, like Iraq, Iran, and now the Islamic State. So keeping Jordan as a state also serves Israel, not only serves the Jordanian ruling family, it also serves Israel. So it is a meeting of interests. This is why it continues to be.
Now, coming back on your multi-state approach, I have a problem when I start to compare it to what Danny Danon came out with us. He calls it the three-state solution.
It is a good beginning.
Yeah. Okay. No, okay. Because I was really surprised by the way he had a very good TV program here, and he came across very well when he presented his book. He's now at the, he's now
the ambassador to the United Nations.
Yeah.
Danilo is a good friend of mine. I sat with him on the 8 Emirate solution, which I suggested. Apparently, he bought parts of it, and okay, we still have what to work on. But don't forget that he represents Israel. He is not talking by as a private man, and he must stick to the line, the political line of the government.
Yeah.
He cannot run.
His own, yeah.
He cannot run his own policy. So if the state policy does not agree with the 8 states Emirate solution because of the Americans, so he cannot open a new line of policy independently from the government.
Yeah. There. What do you see Israel doing? I mean, in concrete way regarding the danger now, which comes from Gaza, Hamas, and from Lebanon, Hezbollah. Now, if the messages are correct, Hamas was approached by Iran, and Hamas refused their help, saying that they stick with, according to what they say, they stick with Saudi Arabia. Now, how does Israel look at the entire situation, north-south of their borders?
Well, first of all, Israel considers Hamas in Gaza as the ruler, means the government. And whenever anyone from Gaza shoots at Israel, we targets of Hamas. Because in our view, Hamas is the master of the place. Hamas should enforce law and order, and if they fail, they pay the price. This is on the security point of view. The alliances of Hamas with other parties in the Islamic world, sometimes it's Syria, sometimes it's Saudi Arabia, sometimes it's Iran, is a shifting issue according to the changing situation. Today, because of the atrocities in Syria, where Sunni Muslims are targeted by Assad, who is supported by Iran, Hamas cannot go to bed with Iran, which is supporting Assad, who kills Sunni Muslims. And this is actually what the Syrian atrocity brought into the relations between Hamas and Iran, which once was very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the changing of the situation changed the relations as well.
Okay, what now changing completely and looking at the so-called refugee problem, which Europe is faced with, and the United States to a certain extent as well. What is the advice or the suggestion that Israel can give to Europe and to the United States regarding that so-called problem?
Well, I'm not speaking in the name of the State of Israel. I'm not still in the government. My own recommendation would be, first of all, the world should tell the Saudis, who are responsible, at least partially, to the atrocity in Syria, you guys, yesterday, before today, you take 100,000 Syrian refugees. Otherwise, you'll pay a price, heavy price. Why? Because you are responsible for this. Secondly, the world should say to the Iranians, you are much more responsible than the Saudis to what happens in Syria because you support Assad. You take 300,000 refugees, otherwise, no deal. Okay? This is how the world should start. Then to see what happens with children, with women, who definitely have to be protected from atrocities, and Turkey, who is also responsible for what happens in Syria, should also bear part of the responsibility to these people, not sending them by boats which sink in the Mediterranean with the children. And actually they don't come from Syria, they come from Turkey. Who understands this? Why? Why shouldn't Turkey take care of them? After all, Turkey is responsible for this. Means the Islamic world can be part of the atrocity, can take part and not pay any price. And in my view,
Get a free ticket.
yeah, free ticket. In my view, the best support to the Syrian refugees would be to force Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey to accept them and to repatriate them. Maybe this will convince them to stop the atrocities in Syria.
But how do you see today, if we look at the so-called refugees, they are all in the age group of between 18 and 35, all
And males.
And males. Now, in my opinion, when you are faced with atrocity, you send the wives and the children out, and you stay there to fight.
Right.
So what is now here? It's exactly the opposite.
And they come with the cell phones.
Yes.
And they know exactly when.
Sir?
Okay. So this and many of them are not Syrians.
No.
Many of them come from many other countries, but they throw out the passports and every documentation which they have, and they say that they are Syrians. Okay. This is unfortunate, and not to mention those jihadists of the Islamic State, which already infiltrated into Europe with these groups of so-called refugees. Again, I'm not saying that all the refugees should be rejected, but there are some remedies to the refugee problem which have not yet been implemented, like sending them, many of them, to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, and repatriating them in Turkey. All these countries are responsible for the atrocities in Syria.
Now let's go back to the problem at hand with Israel. Israel is being forced, as I see, by Europe and by United States to accept a solution regarding the so-called Palestinian problem. Don't you think that Israel should, with its neighbors, should try to find a solution, if anything, but not being forced by outside powers?
Well, our neighbors are Egypt, Jordan.
Yeah.
These are the only two countries to whom we can speak. Syria doesn't exist, and Lebanon is governed by Hezbollah.
Yeah.
So, again, neither Egypt nor Jordan will help Israel in this issue. For them, any solution for the Palestinian problem outside from Israel will be depicted by the Palestinians as treason, as a knife in the Palestinians' back. And no Arab leader or ruler wants to be viewed as a traitor who betrayed the Palestinian cause. This is why Egypt will never give any, let's say, space in Sinai in order to repatriate the Palestinians or the refugees of Palestinians, and neither Jordan, because Jordan hates the Palestinians, the Jordanian regime, more than many others. So this is why Israel cannot count on Egypt or Jordan to help Israel in solving the Palestinian problem. This is why we should solve it by our own means establishing the 7 Palestinian Emirates in the cities of the Judea and Samaria and Gaza, in addition to Gaza, while other Palestinians can be Israeli citizens, like in the Galilee and the south, and in the rural areas of Judea and Samaria. By the way, this solution is very well described in the website www.palestinianemirates.com.
That's definitely, I'll take it out. But don't you think that eventually now, with also the opening that al-Sisi did on a religious side, that he said that Islam should live in today's world and not in 1400 years ago, and upgrade and modernize the entire theology.
The reform.
Yeah, the reform. He is a great and he, in my opinion, he great courage to openly.
Great courage, definitely. The question is, if those clerics of Islam listen to him,
Yeah.
and believe me, nobody listens to him. Nobody takes him seriously. Only the clerics of the Azhar
Yeah.
in Egypt, who are paid by him. He pays their salary. So they nod with their head, yes, you are right. But what do they do in order to reform Islam? Not much. Others who do not get the salaries from him, they say that he actually recites what is being dictated upon him by the Israelis, by the Americans, by the Europeans, by the other Christians. Okay? So this is why any talking about reforming Islam by people who are not real clerics has no influence on the Islamists.
Now, changing and talking about the oil finds that Israel has in the Mediterranean, now the relationship flourishing with Cyprus, with Greece, and with Egypt through that oil business. Don't you think that this is a positive sign?
Well, this is gas. Maybe oil will be found later under the gas. Yes, there are some opportunities with countries. By the way, Turkey might also join the eastern basin of the Mediterranean, which will benefit from those findings of gas. And maybe this is the chance that people will look at business and good life and health and education and infrastructure and promoting their countries rather than sinking into feuds and hate and struggles which they suffer from for who knows how many centuries, if not millennia. So this is the chance. Yet we cannot force them to join the modern world by pushing aside all the rivalries from the past and start opening new page in history. If they do it willingly, it will be very good. But neither Israel nor any other country in the world can force them to do it.
But don't you think that the first step should be the, let's say, the putting aside of Erdogan? Because Erdogan is an egomaniac.
Look, don't forget that Erdogan is a product of the fact that the Turkish society returned to Islam.
Yeah.
After it was forced to embrace secularism by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk since the 20s. There is some kind of backlash of the Turkish society, and the Islamic party, the AKP, and the Erdogan as a prime minister, or today a president, is only the result. He is not the problem. He is the symptom of the problem. Of course, he has his personal issues and ways of conduct. Okay. Look, it could be that in the Turkish culture, they need somebody strong.
That is quite the trait of many countries in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and he reflects it.
Yeah.
So maybe he fits the Turks much more than other countries like him. So we cannot re-engineer them according to our point of view. We cannot shape Turkey according to what we like or do not like. We have to live with the situation as it is.
Yeah, but the Turks, in my opinion, have also the big problem with the Kurds. The Kurds is a huge problem.
The Turks have many problems. The Kurds is one of them. There is in Turkey a very sharp divide between Islamists, which are represented by Erdogan, and people who are more modern, people who follow the thoughts and the teachings of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk of secularism, liberalism, modernism in the European style. And this is, in my view, another problem which Turkey suffers from, and unrest in Turkey, which you see through the years, is at least partially a result of this divide in the social and the cultural issues in Turkey.
But you see, Turkey, because of that, is still knocking at the door of the European Union. They don't want them because of that.
Well, 3 years ago, when Greece was in a very deep financial problem, the Turks were actually making jokes that you didn't want us, thank you, because the last thing on earth which the Turks want is to sponsor the Greeks. They hate them.
Oh, yeah.
So in that time when Greece was in such a problem, the Turks were very satisfied that they were not accepted into the European Union. Yet, I think that Turkey benefits from the European Union quite a lot. As you might know, many factories from Germany, from other countries, moved to Turkey. Instead of bringing Turkish workers to Germany, they preferred to export factories from Germany to Turkey. And many of the European products are made in Turkey. Of course, with the European standards, engineers, of course, but they're made on Turkish soil. So, to a large extent, Turkey is part of the European Union economy.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that the Turks are so eager to enter officially, because they know that one day they might have to pay
Heavily.
the pensions of the Greeks who do not want to work.
Yeah. No, but exiting from the Middle East, the European Union is going through in my opinion, a very bad spell right now.
Well, the European Union actually is giving up on its culture and nature by allowing millions of immigrants who come to Europe without any permission, without any visa, without anything. And they challenge the European culture, they challenge the European women, as we saw in Cologne and many other places as well. They challenge the European economy, because many of them do not work and they rely on social security, on benefits. And even if they work, they don't work officially, so they don't pay taxes and pension funds, all these things. And there is a limit to how much Europe can absorb a culture which functions in a way which is not a European culture.
Now, as the last question I have, that's a general question. What you, as an Israeli, what would you suggest, suggest to Europe and to United States, how to cope with the situation that we are in now, with those so-called refugees? Because it becomes completely out of hand now.
I would do something very easy. I would occupy part of Libya, for example. After all, Libya is a mayhem. And establish a safe haven for these refugees on Libya's soil. Make borders, guard the borders very well, and then build infrastructure to these people, factories, workplaces.
And leave them there.
Yes, and this might be a very, very flourishing country under European and American auspice or protection. After all, the Libyans failed to keep their land as a normal state, and this could be one. And another state which I would establish in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has large spaces which are totally empty. I would take part of these of this country and establish asylum for these unfortunate refugees, with factories, with infrastructure, with education, schools, housing, air conditioning, whatever they need. And you know what? The price will be much lower than the price which Europe pays and to absorb them, and they do not get absorbed in the European countries. And this is what I would do yesterday.
But what is the situation with the ones who are already in? That's the biggest problem.
Look, it is a problem, and in my view, if they catch an Israeli who came to Europe without permission, they deport him to Israel.
Yeah.
And if they catch an American who, let's say, although he doesn't have a visa in Europe, but if he, let's say, he did some offense against the law, they know very well how to put this American on a flight and send him to America with some file. Okay, they know how to do this to people.
But
so
you have to have a will to do.
You have to have a will and the resolution.
Yeah.
To protect Europe from cultures, or from a culture which invades Europe without willing to be European.
I don't know how to thank you. I really appreciate the time you devoted.
My pleasure and my honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wallace.